Welcome back to another episode of What Are You Made Of with your boy, the unstoppable Mike C-Roc. I am in the house today again with another Clubhouse friend. You know, I've found some very intriguing people on Clubhouse, and I talked about this on a different episode about how you can find people that you're aligned with so easily with maybe the title of the room, the club of the room, people's bios, and then listening to people and seeing how that all aligns. It's like shooting fish in a barrel to find friends. And so today I have a friend of mine, Dr. Conor Hogan, PhD. He's the world's leading high performance neuro-socio psychologist. And I wanted to bring him on here to get his, expose his ingredients that have gone into making him. So Dr. Conor, what's happening, man?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, C-Roc. It's great to be here.
So let me ask you a question first before I ask you the famed, what are you made of? How do you know you're the world's leading high performance neuro-socio psychologist? How does that work?
It's a very good question. And by the way, great pronunciation. How do I know? Well, I mean, I'm leading. So I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm leading.
I love it. I love it. I just like stating the facts, man. You state
it
it.
Is a fact. It's a fact.
I love it.
Have you ever had anyone else that's the leading high performance neuro-socio psychologist?
Not that I can remember. Not on my show.
You have the best show. So
that's it. Hey, way to put it together. Well, let's get started then, man. Let's stick with tradition here. Dr. Hogan, what are you made of?
I have a feeling that if I answer this in one way, you're going to dig deeper. So I think the first thing that came to mind there was, I mean, if I look at it, obviously, from a psychological point of view, I think I'm pretty resilient. And I think people and everybody listening has gone through the COVID pandemic, and hopefully we're out the other end of it now. But certainly in the first few weeks in that, I think one of the things that are really important is that you have to be able to adapt. And I think I adapted pretty well. And again, it's very personal, really, thinking back to that point in time, because, it's a big time, something that came at us like a steam train. Nobody expected anything like it. And so you can only look at yourself and the way you felt at that particular time. And that's a wonderful thing, I think, that we can all look at within ourselves. It's a real kind of sign of a true characteristic. It's very easy to say you're resilient, like I've just said about myself, but until you've actually adapted from a point like that, like I've just mentioned with the pandemic, then you can kind of say, yeah, that's one of my really strong traits, I think. And the ability to be able to adapt as well. But I mean, look, there's more, there's different parts of us, you're resilient, I'm resilient, someone else is resilient too as well. So that's just the first one that comes to mind though.
And is that the one that I was going to dig deep in, or is there another one?
Well, that's up to you. Like you can dig any way you want,
But what were you thinking though? You said
that's the first one that came up. I think, in many of the conversations we've had in the past, and you mentioned Clubhouse and many of the stages, a lot of the conversations about entrepreneurship and that. And I think that's one of the things that is really, really, important in that regard. You have to be resilient. You have to take things on the chin. You can't be personal. You got to control your emotions. You have to look at the bigger picture for where you're going in that. And so that takes resilience, that takes a lot of resilience for a lot of people. And everyone starts at a different level. Everyone starts from a different point of view. And so again, you have to look within yourself and go, right, I know exactly how, if something is personally taken away from you, again, to use the example of COVID back in March 2020, for example, if you were working outdoors, for me, I was working in many ways. Yeah, I was working online a bit, but I had my own little clinic. So with that, it's a big shift. I can remember one of the last guys that I had in, I think it was the last particular gentleman I had in, and he had really a lot of problems. He'd fallen down like something like 3 flights of, or 3 floors. He was in London as a construction worker maybe 30, 40 years ago. And he had so many different ailments physically that were coming in his back and stuff like that, but they were more or less neurologically kind of propelled. And we were chatting about this, and he was delighted. It was the first time he came to me, and so he was wondering about the second session. And suddenly it was like, when are we going to have the second session? I said, well, we don't know what this warning that's coming in with this pandemic and so on. Yeah. And I've never seen the guy since, so because I had to adapt then from, having your clinic to physically doing everything online. And so then it's a totally different ball game. So you got to dig in, and you know what you're made of after that, I think.
Yeah. And you have to take your own expertise and use it on yourself, right? In those
Absolutely.
circumstances.
I mean,
Yeah.
anything you do, any type of course or any type of program you do with regard to mental stuff, really, you got to do it yourself. You know, it's not necessarily like doing an accounting course or an engineering course where you can, like, obviously an accounting course, you're going to look at your finances for sure.
Right, right.
You know, if you're poor after that, it's like, well, you know, come on. Well, you know, as an engineer, obviously you can't, you know, actively be doing it on yourself. But with regard to anything, with regard to mindset or anything mental, or even anything physical as well, I mentioned, you know, that obviously the mind-body connection as well is really, really important. That if you're not looking at your health, say, or your mental health, or not aware of what's going on, or what propels this in people who are depressed, or what propels that in people's kind of thinking regard to limitations and that, like, I mean, if you don't look within, you'll never see it in others as well.
Yeah. Well, I want to dig into this stuff, but before I do that, tell me about growing up. Like where'd you grow up and what was it like family like and
Yeah,
life as a kid like?
life as a kid was great, fantastic, old fashioned. I think I'll title that the answer to that question with I'm 42 now. So the internet as we know it in Ireland, even though we're like across the pond from you guys in the US, we were a little bit slower getting it. And we had these, you know, the old dial up connection. So that was the late 1990s. There was probably an area around us where, you know, there was probably about 50 houses, not too far from the city, the west coast of Ireland, probably the fourth biggest city in the Republic of Ireland, Galway. And so we were in a lovely country kind of area, and it was fantastic. And I was an outdoorsy person. So again, with the internet, you know, we had the old-fashioned kind of different ways of thinking, ways of doing things, ways of going to school, college, etc., ways of working. Then, like when you think about the way we met, we'll say, and the Web3 of it all, such a different way. But for me, I was an outdoorsy person, as I am personally right now as well. You know, I love nature, I love sport. I'm a big
Golf,
guy.
play golf.
Well, there's a funny story behind that as well. But actually, we had a golf course. So we were farmers originally. My father was a farmer, and my mother was a nurse. And then there was a few years after that, they decided to use the land as a golf course. So it was an all par three golf course, 18 hole. And so, you know, when I was 12 years of age, essentially it went from being a farmer's son to being an entrepreneur's son to be, you know, I used to come home, cycle back from school, and there you have like all these, you know, wannabe golfers, some people that were very good golfers that just wanted to get a couple of hours in par three. And it was a really, you know, the land was fantastic. There was hills, there was everything, you know, you needed in a tricky par three. There was so many like amen corners, things like that. It was just a
Oh,
lovely,
cool.
perfect area for a par three, and it was right by the sea as well. So you had all that fresh open breeze. So yeah, from that, I grew up with that, you know, dealing with people. I was always a people person. You have this kind of family connection, family business. And so like a typical summer's day, you know, on holidays when I was 12, 14, 18 was you'd go to, you'd work at home, you'd deal with the customers. We had a little bit of a shop going on, a bit of a cafe going on. We even had a restaurant at one stage. So you're dealing with the public all of the time. And then I would, even at 14 years of age, I would go out on the golf course rangering. So you're redirecting people, you know, that were like, if it was a really hot summer's day and you had too many people on the golf course, and there was the first, I think, 8th and 18th tees were all very close to each other. So you had a lot of people. So you'd redirect them from the first tee to the 18th. It was very crowded at the start. So you're dealing with people all the time. You're doing, you know, mature things at a young age. And so that, you know, it really kind of confirms your personality, I think, at that age. And then in the evening, you know, you'd be playing a bit of golf, you know, a few holes here and there, and then you'd run back into the place and kind of help people like with coffees and green fees and things like that, and doing everything else in between, raking bunkers, you know, and then in the evening you go play your own ball, play your native games, which we were brought up on here. And the big thing about sport in Ireland, one of the faults of Irish people, for example, in sport, is that we haven't won so many Olympic games, or obviously we have a very small population of 5 million people, but a lot of our sporting people play the native games here, and our native games they're elite for sure. So we have football and hurling, and our football is kind of like American football in that there's contact, but we don't have all the protection, none, in fact.
Right, right.
And it's not the same shape ball; it's a spherical ball. And then the hurling is kind of like field hockey, And again, there is protection now, helmets in the last few years, but it's quite, there's big contact in it as well. But you can also handle the ball even in the air, so it sticks in the air in your hand. It's a bit tricky at times. But these are ancient games, thousands of years old. So sporting people like myself, we used to play them, quite competitive underage. Then you'd have the colleges level and then the elite level. So my time was taken up in that for the evening time. So it was an ideal growing up. It was fantastic.
And so why do they say Irish people drink so much?
I can't remember because
anyway, so how did you if you want to comment further on that?
I'll have to think about it.
So how did you get into performance?
Yeah, so again, it goes back to all of that sport initially. When you're around all of that, like you have people coming in every minute of the day, saying, here's my scorecard. What do you think of this round? And you're looking at it and it's numbers, and it's like, I think it was par 54. And so if you've, a person that was like, 2 or 3 over as opposed to 2 or 3 under, you explain to them, look, it is what it is. And, you know exactly which hole it was because the land so well where it's with the tricky holes and so on. Even though they're all par 3s, there's ones that are long and then there's ones that, as I said, have more bunkers or a little bit different approach play or whatever else. And then in sport, when you're playing team sport, then like I was, again, it's when you're very serious, and I was very serious about it. I'm a big strong guy, 6'4", athletic, so I was very competitive. I was kind of always captain underage with my teams, and so I always kind of loved doing our best essentially, and trying to find that extra little inch with everything. And you learn then as well as you're growing up that if you have a mentality towards, say, golf, if you're physically very good at golf, but if as golf we know is a very challenging game individually, but if you can overcome that and then you can kind of transfer that into a team sport, well then it's huge, and so there's parallels in different types of performances in that regard, team or individual, but also there's different areas. So I was fascinated with all of that, and I was always kind of reading about things growing up, how to improve and looking at the mental part of the game. And I kind of surmised then when I got a lot of injuries myself and I had to give up playing a lot of ball when I was about 19, 20 years of age, I had a lot of injuries, and none of the medical doctors traditionally could figure out what was going on. And I was getting all these sicknesses as well. And so they couldn't figure out. And again, when I go back to the resilience piece that we spoke about earlier on, and so I was reading about everything, and then like started seeing the connections between the mind, the body, and so on. And then I started just, I was really bad at one stage where just literally, a young person, very sporty, wants to express themselves, wants to play and so on. And you're not doing what your peers are doing. You're 1 minute you're captain of the college team, and the next minute, you're on the scrap heap. And how do you fill your time? And when you're training and practicing every evening, going to matches and games and so on, you have a lot of time to fill. And it's that time, when you're 20 years of age. And so I think a lot of people can kind of, and again, we look at the pandemic, we look at young people right now, and a lot of them, like, how are they filling the time? It's really, really important to kind of figure that out so that we can redirect them, because it's a really, really important time of life. And so for me, thankfully, I started looking at, how can I improve myself? How can I, stay, head above water here and try and kind of keep going to therapists? And, you have a choice, essentially, when you feel your back to the wall. Is kind of, you take what a medical specialist says, or else you go the other direction. For me, I was told, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. But I decided to kind of change and chase what I could to improve. And again, it's a mentality. And then I started reading further when things started working for me. And that's where the love of it all, kind of melted into this higher performance area.
And so what was the vision, like, to work with sports athletes or business people, combination? Or
I would have originally started working with a lot of athletes here. We'll say, for example, that, as I said, the native games, elite performance level, though, like when I give an example of their level, the top ones would have definitely gone to play English Premiership soccer. They would have been asked to come over for trials, would have done all the fitness tests. And this is even 20, 30 years ago. And they would have been, just as prepared as them. The training and everything here is just, second to none. You've got psychologists, you've got nutritionists, you've got every type of professional on the line, just as you have in professional sport. And so it just means so much to people, connects people so much. And also, you can do a lot of business off the back of it. So if you have a sports star over here, a lot of them become very successful after their career. and so they can, they're revered. And
Mhm.
so then I also kind of brushed sides with a lot of musicians as well, doing charity work. So that was one of the things I did personally to fill my earlier time in my earlier 20s with regard to, when you're not going practicing or training and playing games. So I started doing a lot of charity work. And so we put on performances to earn money for charity. And I ended up doing stage manager and things like that. And so I was helping out, like interpersonally, the professional musicians and artists. And so from there, I got asked a couple of times to manage them. There was one or two that asked me, well, two, in fact, that asked me. And at the time I was professionally, then I was a teacher. So again, that coming from, if you're interested in that area and all the coaching and everything that had been around you as a youth, I went to the career of teaching. And so I was, concentrating on my teaching. So I didn't go down that route of,
Okay.
of working with the professional musicians in that regard. So, when you have the sporting, and then you started helping sports stars, and then you started helping the music stars, it's kind of, it's putting the two together then, and there's common attributes in both. At the end of the day, they all need somebody to be able to kind of not hold their hand physically, but to reassure them with regard to that when that big performance comes, that they don't have to be thinking about it. All they think about is what they go through in their practice or in their rehearsal. And so it's automatic, and I mean, great
Yeah.
singers, performers, great sports people, once they have that, that little bit of an edge, if you can give them that little bit of an edge, they feel comforted, they feel as if their hand is held, and it really helps them in their performance then.
And so is there any difference between entrepreneurs and sports athletes in regards to performance? And
Well, I think there's leagues, like if we talk, say, sporting, right? There's leagues, there's no doubt about, like, there's a lot of people, a lot of sports players play at the top level of whatever particular sport there is. But some of them can be very talented from a young age, and everybody knows physically they have all the attributes, and things go well for them, and they get to the top level, and they forge a career and everything's going well. But then there's others that come through, as we know, that don't have all the attributes, but they grind it out. They learn from their mistakes. They lost a lot of things, and they want to improve, and they look to improve, and so on. It's the same, I think, with entrepreneurs. There's leagues. There's people that are at a lower level that just want to make money, want to get by, want to be their own boss. That's a huge thing for a lot of people starting off. And the thing, of course, about money is that once you start getting it in, if you start thinking, if you're the type of person like an entrepreneur who's creative, for example, and has no money, but is very creative, has a lot of ideas, and is also a bit of, a person of action. And even if they fail 100 times, they'll always be the type of person that will create. So if they start getting money in, well, it's just a matter of like, well, where do you put the money into? Like, you have the ideas. But sometimes you find it's like personality traits. You break it down. Some people are very creative, and they're not at all very rational when it comes to, managing the money or looking at the ideas, and they get clouded, and
yeah.
then it's how you manage your energy. Like, you can break it down. At the end of the day, athletes, top athletes, musicians, performers, entrepreneurs, there's a lot of energy, and the very, very best of them are very individual. If you look at Michael Jordan, if you look at Tom Brady, if you look at the top entrepreneurs out there, to get to the multi-millions and then beyond, there has to be that individual drive, or at least that person, if they don't have the attributes or the answers to everything, whatever their personal problems or mindset issues are, they have to be able to go, I'm big enough to, hire somebody that can help me with my mindset, my area of weakness, or whatever else. Because at the end of the day, what's bigger for these people is to get to the top, and everything else is in second place. The pride is shoved aside. And so to get to the very top, but a lot of people have a personal top, again, like I said, top of a lower league, if they can pay their bills, and a bit extra. And, as I say, they have a little bit of creativity, and they know, hey, I'll be able to pump a bit of money into that, and so on,
Yeah, I noticed like Michael Jordan and Tom Brady and all that. Like, I noticed this with top performers, and maybe you could speak to this, that they can play on a team, but at the end of the day, they will separate themselves mentally, physically, and keep their environment. And you talked about individuality, but they also separate themselves a lot because they don't want to be dragged down by mediocrity. Is that what you see?
Well, yeah, if we take Michael Jordan and we all saw The Last Dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could have been a dividing factor with a lot of the audience where everyone admired him. Everyone knows how fantastically gifted he was, how well driven he was, and all of that. But the thing was, when he got to a certain point where it's either me or the team, and Phil Jackson comes in, he kind of smooths things out, and he can kind
Mm-hmm.
of bring the individual back into the team and say, hey, let's look at it from a different point of view. And let's look at it from, we'll say, a more holistic team point of view. And thankfully, Jordan rode in with that, and they got the best out of him. But there was still little sparks of Jordan, the individual there, as we saw throughout it all. And that's the genius. That's the person who has gone through more than anybody probably to get there from their perception.
Yeah.
And we saw, for example, with Jordan, obviously his dad and all of that. But you don't know the personal sacrifice when somebody goes away from the training camp or ground, and what's going on at home. And I'm not talking about Jordan here, but
Right.
any individual, you just
Tiger
don't.
Woods.
Tiger Woods, yeah, you don't
Yeah.
know the personal sacrifices people have made. And so, even when they're younger. And so that person, whatever switch goes off in their head, they mightn't understand it at the time, but they realize that's when I started getting very successful. And so they might be kind of fearful of going back to, well, doing a different way of things. Like you say, Phil Jackson says, let's go down the other road. Let's do it this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
This benefits the team. So he sold them that good and they were successful. But a lot of kind of high performers will be kind of, well, if I give up what has made me very, very successful, then I might be unsuccessful. And so, there's a fear there. And so you have to kind of, as I said, hold their hand. And from the educational perspective, experience perspective, what you do, that's your niche. So, there's a trust there. They buy into it or they don't. And if they do, fantastic. And then you can make the personal relationship. And then it's like any other relationship. You can kind of, trial and error. Look, let me show you a little bit. And oh, it's working for you. So let's go a little bit further,
Yeah. I get that. So and then people like business people, like, you have super successful people, Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, even Grant Cardone now with real estate, he's like just absolutely blowing up. And he's got this individuality to him. He's got this thing to him where he separates himself, I see, and keeps his circle small. And so in business, it works as well, right? And then they can also have a little bit of a fear of like, when's this going to end? Like Grant talks about this a lot. He asks his president, Jared Glenn, a lot, like, when is this going to end, man? When's it going to come to an end? And he's always got this thing in him that he asks that question all the time because he's not sure if it's, I don't want to say he thinks it's luck because he knows how much work he puts into it, but he's just never sure of if it's just a ride that he's like a wave that he's riding, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, that's it. At the end of the day, we're all human.
Yeah.
If you've come from, a different, say, in the field of entrepreneurship, nothing. And a lot of entrepreneurs do. And then suddenly, they use all and every little ounce of energy they have. And then they get something, and then something literally, there's a stroke of luck along the way, perhaps a decision or something, just, the wind blows for you in some regard. And looking back, that could be the thing that really, sets your sail and gets things going really, really well. And, you still remember the times. Like, here's the thing, our brain, when we're very young, what happens is really, really important. Now, I spoke about mental health earlier on, and there's a lot of kind of areas there of mental health where people are kind of really unsure of, right? But the reality is, in my view, that mental health it's a continuum. Everybody can be, they can fall down and hurt your arm, hurt your leg, and that's a physical health ailment. Today, I'm fine. I fell down, I broke my arm. Suddenly, I'm afraid of my, physical health. I have a physical health issue. But it's the same with the mental health. If somebody starts, forcing themselves to look back too much on when they had nothing, when they were younger, say, well, then, yeah, you can actually, that's where this whole law of attraction thing comes in. If you start kind of giving off this, I don't have enough, or I didn't have enough, well, then suddenly, you get into this fear mindset. And if you're doing things from fear, and if it becomes prominent, then you can start making decisions out of fear. And suddenly you make decisions with your investments or whatever, that you put them into the wrong people or the wrong projects or whatever. And then you can actually physically lose a lot of money. And then it's, again, it goes back to what you were when you were very young. So a lot of us say as children, whatever way we were reared, whatever way we were told to do things, or schooled, or our parents or the people around us, that feeds into our subconscious. So when it comes to our adult years, when pressure situations happen, and all the types of professions we've mentioned, like, professional athletes, professional musicians, artists, entrepreneurs, there's moments of pressure. There's moments of pressure for an entrepreneur. I've been at in my own time. I've been at where I was renting a big studio, and on a Friday evening I went in. I think it was about 4:45, and that was the only time the real estate guy wanted me to come in, 4:45 on a Friday evening. And suddenly I went in, and we were supposed to talk about the contract. The contract was like 20 years, and suddenly, before I knew it, they plopped out in front of me this big contract, like 20 pages, and I was like, "Here's a pen, sign here." And it was like 4:45 on a Friday evening. And there's this guy, that gave me the pen. He leaned over me to try and put me under pressure. And so I decided not to sign the contract, and I brought it home, and I got my legal guy to look at it. And it turned out there was a lot of, rent and rates owed on that property. And so if I had signed that, I would have been screwed. I would have been like set back years. And so I didn't. And I went and I got some other property. So it's back to what and what came into my mind, of course, then in that point was, always read the fine print, never sign anything under pressure, these kind of phrases, or all the wisdom that's been imparted, or all the things that you read at a very young age. So again, the subconscious kicks in when there's times and moments of pressure, especially, sporting things, momentary, the bounce of the ball, that kind of thing. So that's what you're made of. So even, anybody who's gone through a tough past, go back to the resilience piece again. A lot of people, for example, basketballers or footballers who are in ghettos or tough places, there could be drugs around the corner. There could be, people that you're playing with, that one day at 13, 14 years of age, you're going to play a bit of ball, shoot a few hoops, and suddenly these guys are trying to bring you down the path of drugs or whatever else. So you have a choice. You might have a choice to say, no, I'm just going to play ball here on the court, and I'm going to shoot for a couple of hours, and then I'm going to go home. And that can be a choice then of loneliness, and that can dictate the next few years of that person. But you know what? They have more time to practice on their own, to hone their skills. And unfortunately, maybe they lose their childhood friends. And again, it's, that could impact on relationships later on, even though you have the money, even though you've been a superstar in sport or whatever else. And so there's always that, sometimes we're always looking back to the past, and there can be fear there as well. So it's natural to kind of look back at, that when our brain was wired first, the first few years are really, really important.
Yeah, I see that. So as we wind down here, let me ask you this question. So for me, like, I'm going to turn it on me for a second, because it's my show. So I want to ask you a couple. So I feel like I have this thing inside of me that's like, the potential is unbelievable. I know it. I just know it's there. And sometimes I don't know where to direct it. So in performance, and I have a mission, I have a clear mission, but some days I have all this energy, and I have all this ambition, but also skill and potential and intelligence. I just know it's there, and I feel good about that. I know my self-worth, but there are days where I just don't know where to put it. And I have an idea, but I always get concerned, is this the best use of my time? And what don't I know? So where do you start with working with someone like that?
Well, I think the first thing is, and it's a debate, a lot of people kind of, I don't know about this, but the reality is our brain can only think and do one thing at a time. And so, like you just said there, you have this overall power, there's something really big there. And, some days it's great, things are going well. And then other days it's like, oh, you're probably going nowhere with it. And maybe it's confusing your thinking. So go back to the subconscious piece, whatever is there whenever you felt that first. So that could have been 20 years ago, it could have been, when you were a young guy, you just felt of this power, and you can relate to that feeling. We use words to convey it, like you just did. But unless sometimes people go, well, you get to a certain age and, you're not young anymore. That was just youth. And you get to a certain age and go, I still have this, but my peers don't. I still have this. In fact, it's getting bigger within me. Yeah. So it's a matter of, it literally is a matter of, right, looking at the bigger goal, and then, reverse engineering it back to now. But realizing, and it really is true, if you do one thing at a time, and I know we're in the time of, modern technology and we can do this, that, and the other. But one thing at a time, because what happens is our thinking gets clouded. And when those days come, like you say, those dip days, essentially, and we're like, where's it going? Where's it all going? Like we all hit those peaks and troughs, a great idea, you put money behind it and then suddenly it's gone. It's like, how did that happen? Why why did I make that bad decision? I planned it and suddenly it's gone. So we really need to de-stress, essentially. There's so much stress in this world. And I'm not talking about that with regard to mental health issues or depression, but just ordinary stress that's around us. Like, so many screens, so many audios, so much information, so many people, so much media. And so we need to, switch off, stop, replan, take time out, all of those things. Essentially, the word frequency is often used, and it's really good because if we can tap into the frequency of success with, if you can align that feeling that you have, that power that you have in yourself with that frequency, a lot of people then start talking about this flow, right?
Yep.
Psychology. And it's, again, going back to a great, sports person or a great musician or any type of performer, anybody listening that feels what you've just described right there, that little bit of power, we call it. But they might know that, I haven't felt it in a long time, but it's still in you. Everybody has the capability, everybody. So it's a matter of tapping into that power, getting, in the entrepreneurial sense, the right idea, getting the right people around you, getting the right investments, investors, relationships, etc., getting everything right. And that's where the flow is. That's when things start going, it's easy. That's where you mentioned people that had a lot of money there earlier on. That's how then the money starts to compound, because that's what money does. And when we're in debt, it goes the other way. And the negative feeling comes. So it's a matter of getting into that, tapping into that flow. So I think it's aligning with your idea, with the right time, with you personally in your life to make bigger decisions, such as, personal relationships or children or whatever else, to plan to see this idea is going to take 5 years. It's not going to take one, realistically. So what's the world like now with everything that's going on with regard to this specific idea, and doing your due diligence on that specific niche or whatever. And then once you get, that aha moment or whatever, and everything's going to align, that's when you're giving off that energy as well. And you can find those people. And that's where the internet and all of these things that we've met through can be fantastic, but they can be equally destructive if we don't know our own flow, I think.
Yeah. And so a big part of it, when you're talking about the one thing, is eliminating distraction, eliminating things that aren't aligned with your mission, and being very clear and really low tolerance for it, right?
Absolutely, low 100%. And a lot of these things, we're talking about a lot of technology there as well, but a lot of these things are old-fashioned attributes. The word character is used as well a lot, but that can be such a big, what is character? Break it down for me, but you got to be very persistent, consistent, resilient. A lot of old-fashioned attributes. Just because things have gone wrong for you, say in business before, a bum deal, a bad deal, bad relationships, doesn't mean the next person is not going to be a good person to vibe with.
You have to differentiate.
Yeah, even if it's a memory that's a very similar area or a very similar kind of product or service or whatever else, or figure or amount of money or how much money you've saved just to get to that part of your life again, or to take that opportunity. It doesn't mean to say, and that's the way our minds work as well. We have this kind of vicious loop back to, the feeling of the memory. And so we stall when we're very close to something big. When an opportunity presents, a lot of us can carve out opportunities, but we don't take them. That last bit, that last percentage to take them, to jump onto the stage, grab the microphone, and just, with no script, be able to just perform.
Yeah. I love it, man. I could talk to you all day, and I want to thank you for coming on today, man. And I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate the relationship we're developing, and I look forward to seeing you or hearing you more on Clubhouse. And how can my audience reach you? And is there anything that you're into right now that you want to tell them about?
Nothing really, just docconor.com. Everything's coming from that, the website, docconor.com. Sounds good. Tricky enough to spell.
Awesome, man. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Hey, well, great show, man. If I do say so myself, because you're the guest. So thank you so much. Thank you all for being here and listening. If you like to watch these, go to YouTube at Mike C-Roc, Ciorrocco. You could check out these, watch them. Or if you listen to them, just go subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. And look, we just want to keep bringing guests to help you be unstoppable, living the life of your dreams. That's my mission. And I'm going to continue to press that till I get plucked from this planet. I'm unstoppable. So I want you till next time to be unstoppable.